Okay, so on August 6th, 2025, a massive geopolitical shockwave just slammed into the global markets. It was a sudden, really dramatic escalation in trade tensions between the United States and India. Today, we're going to break down exactly what happened, why it happened, and what it all tells us about a changing world order. So let's start with the threat that really got this whole thing started.
Right, so the stage was set when President Trump openly went after the BRICS economic bloc. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. He clearly sees them as a direct challenge to the dominance of the US dollar. And he threw down the gauntlet, proposing a 10% tariff on any country in that group. But what actually happened? Well, it was way more severe.
The tariff that actually hit India wasn't 10%. No, it was a massive 50%. That is one of the highest punitive duties ever imposed on a major U.S. trading partner. This wasn't just some warning shot. This was a full-blown economic broadside. So what was the immediate impact of a 50% tariff? You guessed it, the ripple effects hit Indian markets and industries almost instantly. The sheer scale of the potential damage is just staggering. I mean, we're talking about a hit to over half of India's exports to its single biggest trading partner. This is not a minor dispute. This is a direct threat to a core pillar of the entire Indian economy.
But the pain wasn't spread out evenly. Not at all. It was highly concentrated in these very specific, labor-intensive sectors that are just deeply reliant on American consumers. We're talking industries like textiles, auto parts, and jewelry. For them, a 50% duty is absolutely catastrophic.
And the market reaction was swift, and it was brutal. Well-spun India, a huge home textiles exporter, saw its stock tumble 7% in just one session. Investors were pricing in the very real possibility of canceled orders and completely collapsing margins. And the pain just kept coming. Companies like Keytex Garments, which gets something like 70% of its sales from the US, their stock dropped 5%. You can just feel the immediate fear that their primary market was, for all intents and purposes, being shut down.
And this shockwave didn't stop with textiles. It spread to crucial industrial sectors, things like auto components. A key player like Barrett Forge, which has significant U.S. exposure, saw its stock slide 3%.
Okay, so this level of economic damage raises a pretty obvious question. Why? I mean, what was the official justification for such a drastic move? And more importantly, what story is the data really telling us?
So the Trump administration's official line was that this was all about punishing India for continuing to buy discounted Russian oil. But a lot of analysts see that as just an excuse. The real goal, they argue, is to use these tariffs as a blunt instrument to force India into a new trade deal, one that benefits the U.S. and shrinks its trade deficit. And this is the question that really gets to the heart of it. In 2024, China actually overtook India as the #1 importer of Russian oil. So, if the policy is about punishing Russia's customers, why the laser focus on India and not China? The answer, well, it reveals the real strategy at play here. The difference, it turns out, lies in what the U.S. buys from each country. See, the American economy is critically dependent on China for high-tech strategic goods, thanks semiconductors, computers, cell phones that you just can't replace easily. India's top exports, like generic drugs and diamonds, while definitely important, are seen as less strategic and more replaceable from Washington's point of view.
And this was pretty much confirmed in a very candid admission from Trump's own trade advisor. The administration understands that escalating the trade war with China any further would just boomerang and inflict significant damage on the U.S. economy itself. China has leverage that India, right now, does not.
But here's the twist. This policy, which was designed to project American strength and force India into a corner, it's having a pretty startling and, frankly, unintended consequence. It's actually pushing two of America's biggest rivals closer together. In direct response to the tariff pressure, India is making a huge diplomatic pivot. China's foreign minister visited for the first time in 3 years. The two nations held their first formal talks in 5 years to resolve a violent border dispute, with Russia actually helping to mediate. Trump's move is, ironically, healing old wounds.
And this represents a really stunning historical irony. I mean, for 50 years, American grand strategy was built on keeping its main rivals divided. From Nixon allying with China to contain the Soviets, to more recent efforts to ally with India to contain China. This tariff policy is actively undoing that entire legacy. So why can't the US just strong-arm India into compliance? Well, this brings us to the fundamental shift in global power that really defines the era we're living in right now.
The reason is simple. India is not a minor player to be dictated to. When you measure by purchasing power, which is basically what money can actually buy in a country, it's the world's third largest economy, right behind China and the US. It's a great power in its own right, with its own agenda and its own options.
At the core of India's strategy is this long-standing principle of non-alignment. And this isn't about choosing a side in some new Cold War between the US and China. It's all about maintaining independence and maximizing its own interests by engaging with all powers. And in practice, this non-alignment allows India to play multiple cards at once. It uses its BRICS membership as a key diplomatic tool. At the very same time, it deepens security ties with the US through groups like the Quad when it suits them. And now, in response to American pressure, it's mending fences with China. It's a really pragmatic, flexible strategy. And ultimately, this isn't just an India story. It's the new playbook for a multipolar world. You see middle powers like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE all doing the same thing, playing all sides, refusing to be locked into a single camp, and leveraging their position between great powers for their own benefit. Which leaves us with a final and pretty critical question. As the old unipolar order fades away and new alliances form and fracture, this trade dispute really shows us that power is more spread out than ever before. In this new global game, it's just not clear anymore who's holding the winning hand.